money.
Okay,
Good.
from somebody.
Ann?
Just a minute on, you know, I think the tough part about this crisis is that the jobs that have been lost won't be replaced in the same places. So it creates this, whether it's, you know, small businesses that are popping up, but even for us, I mean, for big companies, you take fixed cost out, we're actually funding agents and dealers to create kind of, you know, flexible distribution arrangements and doing it indirectly versus directly now, which I think is going to be a big part of what happens for big companies that need to extend their reach. They're not going to do it in traditional ways. They're going to do it more in non-traditional ways. But I wouldn't want to lose the point on kind of investing in research, because I truly believe that this gets back to the kind of, you know, the courage for long-term versus short-term, and I think that's been tested seriously, and we're taking a step backwards in this country through this time.
You think, we mean in the sense that investment's going down?
Yes.
In R&D? And
I also think it's being brought in to more short-term. If you look at what's happening in so many research facilities, the distance, yeah,
mostly.
It's all, you know, kind of, it's in the 3 to 5 year kind of time frame.
Incremental improvements.
Incremental improvements.
I
mean, it's approaching engineering versus research in terms of how it's being spent. And I think the need to kind of go upstream and allow kind of research to do what it does best and really innovate on the longer term is what we've got to focus on. And, and that takes courage, because most of us don't necessarily see the returns of some of those investments, and it's got to be about companies that do the right thing in terms of investing in research.
But the big returns, if you study the last 25 years, have come from companies that made the big, bold moves.
Yep.
That's where the, you know, your company, but a lot of them are out there. That's where but will the stock market permit, you know, companies to really make those, to make those investments? It may take 10 years. I was at one of the world's largest pharmaceutical company the other day, and the CEO was saying, you know, the market doesn't seem to have any interest. It takes me 10 years to invent a drug, and no one's figured out how to do it in 10 months. It would be nice if we could, but you can't. At least you can't get through the approval cycle in that time.
That's kind of the leadership role. It's the ability not to kind of polarize those decisions and do both, you know?
Do you see any real serious mounting effort inside the government or the corridors of power about really creating new jobs, the kind of jobs these three CEOs are talking about?
What I don't think we have, Bill, is a serious national strategy for innovation and the long-term growth of the country. I think we've got bits and pieces here and there, but it's not something that's coherent and that we have agreed on. And yeah, my hope is that once we get beyond this current struggle, this fight over health care, and it will, you know, one day we will come to resolution one way or the other, but that it would be time to sort of pause and then sort of take a big look at where are we trying to go now? What is the big picture, what we're trying to do? It does seem to me that it's sort of like the president needs to step back, the country needs to take a deep breath, and then think, hopefully in a more confident and united way than we've been. I mean, we're at each other's throats now.
Yeah.
And I do think, in terms of going back to this going back to what I heard, it was so you know, strong from Marilyn and from John, was about the importance of culture to an organization, or to indeed, and I think to a society, in solving problems. You talked about your internal culture. You talked about the internal culture of eBay. And the same thing is true for a society. If you've got a healthy culture in which the people are largely self-reliant in a democracy, have learned to look after themselves, it can make a real difference. One of the most moving moments I ever had in the White House was when a group of historians came in and veterans came in to talk to Bill Clinton before he went to commemorate the 50th anniversary of D-Day. And Stephen Ambrose was there, and he had written these books about D-Day, he'd written A Band of Brothers, and wonderful storyteller. And he told the story of D-Day. It was almost like Saving Private Ryan, except listening to it on audio. And it was a very moving story, but the point he made was, when those American soldiers were taking those beaches and coming under heavy fire, had they been the German army, had they come from a totalitarian state, they would have been immobilized, because everyone would needed to call headquarters about what do we do next. They wouldn't have known what to do without orders, and as people got cut down. But because these were people who came from a self-reliant society in which, you had to take your plow out and plow the field by yourself, and you sort of had to figure it out for yourself, that when the officers went down, when the sergeants went down, the enlisted, going back to your Napoleon point, every soldier with a baton in his knapsack, that the enlisted, instead of saying, what do we do now, or retreating into their ships, or just getting mowed down, said, follow me. Yeah. We're going to take the beach.
But is that actually hopeful that it won't have to necessarily be a national policy? Are we starting to see communities? Our community is coming together and saying, how are we going to create jobs? And we're looking at it, this Itasca group. I heard Bloomberg putting together these innovation centers and putting 100,000 into the first one, and inviting small businesses to come into the center and get some purchasing power and some shared services so that they can compete with some of the larger companies. And maybe, I think if we have regulated markets, somewhat regulated markets, so that we can...
Lightly regulated.
Lightly regulated.
Prudently regulated.
Prudently regulated. But, nonetheless, it is somewhere between greed and ambition is our future. And, it's the humans want to compete. Our community, our cities want to compete. Our state wants to compete. We want to compete. There are more people thinking of new little places in our business that we might bring a new value or add a new service.
You have to keep the animal spirits of capitalism have to be unleashed, but they have to be, they can't be savage. You have to sort of...
Exactly.
How do we create that collective spirit, though? How do you get that next generation of leaders who has more of that collective spirit and still, sees the opportunities for significant rewards?
I must admit, I'm encouraged about the leaders I see going into companies. I think that, that they a little bit more of the kind of good to great, kind of put your company first, and the kinds of characteristics you talk about. I see it far more frequently, and I actually think that's encouraging. I think on the collaboration side, I do think that we need to do a lot more to create problem solving through the combined efforts of government, business, and academia. And I think that the opportunity, first of all, it will not get solved strictly by, any particular constituency. And one of the things that I think has been a little bit difficult and troubling is that this crisis has come upon us so quickly, and I'm not sure we've had as thoughtful and organized approach to collaborating and getting, kind of business and government and, the academic world together in really joining hands and creating more of a shared approach to some of these problems.